Hello, you're listening to the Continuing Education Update from Northern New York Library Network for August 2023. So first up, I've been trying to reach you about your Northern New York Library Network annual member survey. There are 3 car warranty themed memes for you to enjoy at the top of the newsletter, but in all seriousness, we've had fewer people responding so far this year than last year, which is okay. I think that engagement waxes and wanes. But one thing that's standing out in the limited replies that we do have is that there seems to be up to like a 33 or 35% difference in some of the values that you have stated that you care about personally and for your own professional practice. That 33-35% difference is different than the kind of numbers that you attribute your organization or your institution that you work for putting value in some of the values asked questions on the survey. So I think it's really important to get that information from y'all, and just so you know, like, this helps us plan programming better for you and for your career, and it's not just for the betterment of the institution you work for. Okay, so on August 7th, we had an event at Historic Saranac Lake that was hybrid. Chessie Monks-Kelly and Julia Alvarez discuss archives and architecture. I put that up on YouTube. It was a really wonderful day, and it was really so great to see and to, be there in person. And, but I think that the webinar discussion was really, really fascinating. I always love talking to people that are thinking about buildings in terms of storage and the collection needs. All right, so next up, I'm really excited to announce, hello, researcher, your concierge guide to professional databases. We're going to be going over a whole galaxy of resources that Northern New York Library Network subscribes in order to offer you access to databases like Newsbank, Tech Talk, Informed Librarian Online, OmniFile, which is an EBSCO product now, used to be Wilson Web, and then the Watertown Daily Times, which is a newspaper that you have subscription access to full text through Newsbank. And I just want to point out that the Watertown Daily Times is the only still operating newspaper printing press, or I guess it's not a press, but it's the only wheels of ink running in the North Country actually printing newspapers anymore in Watertown. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I definitely want to highlight why we subscribe to these things for you, and just try to figure out how to make them as usable and accessible to you as possible. These are professional tools that, are here for your own career and your own professional development. So we can look at different methodologies and different evidence-based practices, or we can just do some research for art's sake. But please join us on September 21st at 10 a.m. And that is an online webinar that will be probably put on YouTube afterwards. I'm also so excited to announce our fall meeting, which is October 4th, 10-4. Coffee and tea start at 9:30. Presentations start at 10 a.m. It'll be a hybrid event. If you're coming in person, in addition to snacks, lunch, coffee, tea, we're also going to be offering party favors that you'll be able to pick up the day of. We'll mail something out to people who attend hybrid. And the morning is going to be grantee presentations from people who got grants last year for our action and collection grants. And then the afternoon, there'll be a little bit of time to walk around the lovely trails and boardwalks and the Barnum Pond and all the beautiful stuff at the Vic. But the afternoon is also going to be a time for some reflective, qualitative work. We're going to talk about just like the research that we do in our own process, and we're going to set up and form little study groups. And that is in place of having endless like special interest group meetings that just go on and on forever. We're asking people who are able to join us that day to help us lay the foundation and get us started, because we want to be doing little research projects and reporting on them and telling back to you what happened with them, and collaborating. Really, we're just trying to get all of our needs met in the most beautiful way possible. So please join us in the afternoon for that. And let's see, the program presentations for the fall meeting, I'm really excited about. There's going to be a presentation from the Bear Hill Correctional Facility in Malone called Book a Better Future. The Franklin County Historical Museum Society is doing a virtual field trip development program report. Paul Smith College Library is going to be talking about undergraduate capstone migration and institutional repository through a new institutional repository that is through the Empire State Library Network. Watertown Central Library, shout out to Flower Memorial, is going to be talking about equity through STEM. Canton Free Library will be reporting on their shared services study. Clarkson University will be talking about reckoning with race and racism in healthcare and medicine. St. Lawrence University Library will be discussing digital DEI, making digital scholarship more equitable and inclusive. And our buddies at Historic Saranac Lake are going to be talking about physical preservation of blueprints to ensure access. So RSVP 10-4. Okay, next up is a little highlight of a webinar that already happened from Central New York Library Resources Council called Embodying DEI and Cultural Humility in the Workplace, presented by Tawana Hodges, who's a PhD candidate at University of Maryland College Park. And I put this in here because it's about cultural humility, and I think it connected and annotated and amended the work that Lori Townsend, David Hurley, and Sarah Kostelecki presented at our annual meeting. And Tawana Hodges says that cultural humility is the next evolution from cultural competency. It's about mutually beneficial partnerships that are not paternalistic. So I highly recommend listening to that if you're interested in sort of like workplace issues about how to, walk the walk, talk the talk. Okay, so, and then I highlighted again our annual meeting from this year with a cute meme from The Office about cultural humility, which is not thinking that you're bad at everything, but it's about recognizing your talents and not viewing yourself as better than others because of them. And all right, so next up is the Ask a Lawyer with Cole. This service focuses on issues pertinent to libraries, archives, and museums, including copyright, labor laws, safety plans, unions, employee rights, and book challenges. You can view past Ask the Lawyer resources at the link, and the questions that were most recent for August involved real estate. What do you do when someone wants to give you a building or like the pool next door or something? And they also talk about tax exemptions. Okay, next up is a highlight on Informed Librarian Online, which we'll be discussing more in depth on September 21st at 10 a.m. for Hello Researcher, your guide to NNYLN databases. But I put it in here because Informed Librarian Online also has two authorship opportunities. You can have your library featured and write a little column about it, or you can write a guest forum on any topic you want. So there's a link in there to contact Arlene if you're interested in doing that. And next up is a whole list of dates and webinar titles for the rest of August through early October. So here we go. August 25th at 12 p.m. is Centering Historic Preservation in Community. The Oneida Community Mansion and the Preservation League of New York State will host a webinar to discuss the challenges of preserving historic structures. The session will share one site's journey to address a building's needs with limited resources. Learn how the Oneida Community Mansion House, the home of the utopian Oneida community, interprets the preservation of historic structures for wider public audiences. Further conversations will explore ways in which sites can approach planning for and funding historic preservation projects. This is presented by the Museum Association of New York. On September 4th, DIPSNY is presenting anti-racist approaches to collections accessibility with the guiding question of how can collecting organizations use anti-racist approaches to make their collections as accessible as possible to their communities and public. The program description says that this webinar invites participants to explore anti-racist approaches to collections accessibility, interrogate strategies to operationalize these anti-racist approaches. This program is designed for people who work in or volunteer for museums, libraries, archives, and cultural heritage organizations and are looking for practical approaches and strategies to share their collections. Next up is on September 6th at 2 p.m. From our peers at Long Island Library Resources Council is exploring Jewish genealogy with the Museum of Jewish Heritage, Jewish Gen, and JLTV. On September 8th at noon to 1:30 is Prisms, Reflections on Prison History and Criminal Justice Reform in New York State through the lens of Auburn, Attica, and Sing Sing. These three prisons have embarked on explorations of their complicated narratives using the exhibition format. The exhibitions include uncovering difficult and often disturbing stories as viewed by those from the outside and the inside. The panel includes leaders across the field, formerly incarcerated people, as well as those engaged in monitoring and reporting on the New York State correctional systems, and they're going to take a deep dive into this hidden world. That's from the Museum Association of New York. Super looking forward to that. September 14th at 2 p.m. is Bridge Building, which is fostering community engagement and dialogue. This is about the Bridge Building Resources Hub. You can learn more about it in the newsletter. Next up on September 19th at 10 a.m. is Serving the Neurodiverse Library User, Tips for Effective Interactions and Designing Inclusive Library Spaces, Services, and Programs. This morning program on the 19th at 10 a.m. is brought to us from our peers at Central New York Library Resources Council and features Dawn Behrend, who's the Instructional and Outreach Librarian at Lenore Rhine University, based in Asheville and Hickory, I think. I think they have a campus in South Carolina too. They have a really, really great social work, becoming a clinical social worker therapist program. So I think that program about the neurodiverse library user is going to be really good because I know that's a specialty of that college. September 21st at 10 a.m. Is your very own Lydia talking to you called Hello Researcher, your concierge guide to databases for your professional use. So please sign up for that. I already talked about it, but it's really going to be a time to get your questions answered, and of course there'll be some follow-up. And last but not least, 10/4, October 4th, so from 10 to 3, 9:30 to 3, if you're into coffee first, we're going to be doing our fall meeting. Hosted 2 years ago, and this was on fascist and authoritarian symbols in the North Country with Joseph Henderson, who's a PhD in environmental and in the Environment and Society Department at Paul Smith College, and I think it's a really useful conversation, really good insight into some of the visual imagery of white nationalism in the North Country. And if you were into that webinar that happened, you're probably also going to be interested in this 8-part series from the Highlander Research and Education Center. So if you are interested in it, it's called Fascism 101. It's a training series about how to understand the threat of globally resurgent fascism. The 8-part series is also presented in Spanish and American Sign Language in addition to English, and they're going to be exploring the many faces of fascism and fronts to anti-fascist resistance. And the Highlander Research Center, they've done a lot of different organizing over the years, working on textile strikes in Marion, North Carolina. In the 30s, they visited, I don't need to go over the whole history of this stuff, but it does have some Scandinavian Danish folk school overlay. And then in the 50s and 60s, they got more interested in started doing programming around citizenship, schools, and this is when the civil rights movement really comes to a head, and folks like Rosa Parks and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee actually met at Highlander and did a lot of their training there in preparation for the Montgomery bus boycott and other initiatives like that. So they're continuing to do this kind of organizing resistance work, really focused on struggles of people with a real global context. So, again, like, this is down in Tennessee, but this is like really radical stuff that's down in Tennessee. And they've been doing it since 1907. That's over 100 years. And they're doing an 8-part series on on Fascism 101. And I really think it's going to be great if you can catch just one of those. I'm sure it'll be interesting and fascinating. And also just like check them out as an organization if you're into embodying DEI and cultural Congratulations, humility. You live in New York State, where on August 9th, there was an official guidance that came from the Office of the Attorney General and the New York State Board of Regents, who said that teaching curricula that accurately portray and analyze historical information in a culturally appropriate manner is lawful and encouraged. This new guidance is directed to local education agencies, other known as schools, to inform them of their obligation to place dignity, inclusion, and respect at the center of their educational decisions. And this was really exciting because, like, as I just talked about previously with places like the Highlander Center in Tennessee, not every state is so, right now is so focused on teaching culturally appropriate information that accurately portrays and analyzes historical, history. So this was a really, I think, important release from the Attorney General Office and the Board of Regents. The guidance letter cites law after law, state and federal, that protect against book banning, censorship, the employment rights of people who are facing those challenges, curricular epistemicide, which is when people destroy your history or try to, like they're doing in Florida, like show you that, well, I don't even want to talk about Florida. Or if I do, like, call me up and we could talk about Florida. But this is just a really strong guidance. And I know we've been getting a lot of questions about book banning and censorship and stuff. So this is a really clear and direct message that New York State is not putting up with that. Next up, we round out the newsletter with some recommended professional resources for your interdisciplinary practice. I've got links on here from a suite of classes and webinars available to you from the Foundation for Advancement and Conservation. It's called Connecting to Collections Care. And they really are committed to serving small and mid-sized cultural institutions, helping staff and volunteers care for their collections in the best possible way. Some upcoming resources that are on that site include something called the Poison Book Project, what you need to know about heavy metals and historical book binding. And there's also one on arsenic in collections and fire suppression in museums. So I think that's super fun. All right. And then the other professional resource I linked to is Black Perspectives, which is a newsletter from the African American Intellectual History Society. They're a really great organization, and it's a really great interview with Mikhail Carter, who's a PhD student at Auburn University. And it's an interview with Mark Anthony Neal, who's the James B. Duke Distinguished Professor of African American Studies and Chair of the Department at Duke University. He's the founding host of a Webby-nominated video podcast called Left of Black, and he has a most recent book that's called Black Ephemera, The Crisis and Challenge of the Musical Archive. And I think there's a lot of super interesting stuff theoretically in that book. I really want to interrogate and ask a lot of questions about concepts like dark archive and things like that when it comes to Black perspectives on it. But the reason I linked to this article is because they talk about hip hop as archival practice and form. And I think I hinted at that a little bit with asking some interrogating questions about, musical archives, the crisis and challenge. But this is a really fascinating interview, and I think it's a really great way of thinking about citation, remixing, reuse, call, response. Like, how do we assemble, curate, collate, annotate, organize, speculate, all of our collections into like a playlist or into a remix and things like that. So I think that's really great for the 50th anniversary hip hop celebration all over the world. And then if you're reading this, if you click the link to read this in your browser, you're also going to get a final little Easter egg. I linked to for turkey season because I've seen a lot of poults out lately. So have a good rest of your month, and we'll be in touch. Talk to you in September.